Hello, and welcome to the Center of Agriculture Profitability seminars, Thursday seminars sponsored by the Center and also the Department of Agriculture Economics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Today, we're going to talk about the UNL TAPS program and some of the things that we've learned from it. My name is Matt Stockton, and I'm one of the executive team members as well as one of the creators of the program, and I'm an economist. And so welcome, and I hope that you find this interesting. And if there are any questions, you guys are more than anybody's welcome to ask while we're going along or at the end, or you can also call any one of us at the end. I have some contact information. All right, first things first, what is the TAPS program? Well, TAPS is kind of a cool name because it's, it sounds like somebody's playing a trumpet, but TAPS is an acronym that stands for Testing Agriculture Performance Solutions. And then it's made up of those letters. And basically the idea is that we have technology and things that people can test out. It's a collection of educational events. In other words, TAPS isn't just one thing. It's mostly built around the concept of a contest and the concept that there's a contest going on, but then there's also real time, which is in real time using real life production, so that the program lasts about 9 months from start to finish. By the time you get started with the kickoff meetings and you do the field days and you have all the decisions by the producers that are made and the banquet and celebration, it's 9 months to almost 11 months depending on the year. And it's actually a pretty long program, but it's kind of a cool program, and there's ways you can ride along with it even if you're not a contestant. The contest itself is overseen by the University TAPS team. That's a lot of different people. We have educators, we have technicians here at the West Central Research Extension Center for the contests that are run here. Of course, there's an Oklahoma version, and there's also a wheat version, which is run out at the Panhandle Station by Cody Creech and his team. Competitors work directly with technology and providers, and that's where the performance solutions kind of comes in, testing, where people can have a chance to test and work with those things. So the structure of TAPS, what exactly? Okay, so I've told you a little bit about it and kind of what it is, kind of, but what really is it? It's basically the university has land, and we take that land and divide it up into little plots, and those little plots are replicated 3 times for every contestant. And so we have physical farms. So it's an actual physical farms that we manage as a university, but we don't make the management decisions. The decisions are made by the competitors. And for example, in the sprinkler corn, there's a multi-peril crop insurance decision. There's a plant variety selection decision. In other words, you choose which variety of hybrid corn you're going to grow, the number of seeds planted per acre, the irrigation and fertilization, nitrogen fertilization, of course, on the plot. In other words, how much do you want per acre to put on, and when you're going to put it on, and those sorts of things. And then, of course, the marketing decision for the whole season. So the sprinkler corn concept, but this we have what they call the expected yield, or the APR, if you want to call it that, average production history, is about 225 to 250 bushels. That at 3,000 bushels, that adds up to 675,000 bushels that you need to market sometimes during that 9-month period. And of course, you don't really market corn, but you have to identify prices and some things, how much you sold and those kinds of things, so you can use the market all the way through the season. And I guess if you don't want to, you don't market anything and wait to the end of the year, and then you get whatever price that's given, which usually is not the winner, by the way. Open discussion, the other thing TAPS does in the structure of it, we have open discussion opportunities. We have the kickoff meeting. We have other meetings where producers meet and talk and get together and socialize. We have peer-to-peer conversations. And I think social enforcement and reinforcement is important, and that the banquet at the end of the year is more of a fun event, but it's also where we announce results and the different things and display the report that is made for the banquet. There's also new technology access, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of that technology in a minute. And we have the competition is related to profitability, efficiency, and productivity. Those are the 3 things that we've related the contest to. It's called a farm management contest because it's all about management. Okay, so Competitors can be in teams or individuals. In other words, if you want, we have had several situations where producers have competed against someone else in their operation, like father and son, or uncle and nephew, or niece, whatever. It's a real-time, real-life gamulation. Gamulation is a kind of a new word, and basically it means it's a simulation, but in this case, it's like a game because it's a contest. And so it's a gamulation, and basically you're having an experience and experiential learning. Each chief manages the farm. The management orders and current status are basically accessed over the internet. So you can use your phone. A lot of producers use their phone to make their irrigation decisions or their nitrogen application decisions. There's also things you can see at the website that have to do with pictures of the farm, of the crop. There's also some aerial photos and some different technologies, imaging, and some different things that they can access. They have access to information about the water probes that are put on their plots, and all the other things that some other technologies they can use. And then also we use a fertigation, which is also technology, and how much to put on during the season and as the season goes on through its timeline. Each team supplies management choices related to their specific farm. They can also see kind of what's going on with others, but they're not going to see their exact decisions until the end. We try to keep that so that people don't know who's who, but they do know which plot did what. So we don't really tell people's names, but at the same time, there's information about what's going on. And at that end of the year, that summary is all in the report, and it's done by farm number, not by name or person. So there is some anonymity associated with it. Now, the reason we also amplify the farm is to create realism. In other words, in the corn contest, it's a 3,000 acre deal. So in other words, if you have a difference in management that maybe creates a half a bushel, what does that really mean on a 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 acre farm? And that's why it's amplified that way. Plus, the marketing is a lot more interesting. I mean, marketing a half an acre of corn doesn't really take that much effort. Well, marketing 675,000 bushels or more, 700, 800,000 bushels in some cases, that's quite a difference in the amount you have to market and the effort you have to put in it. So it keeps it real and it keeps it interesting. Management choices are verified by the University TAPS team. So all the marketing decisions we verify, make sure that they're right. Farms are comparable because they're all in the same plot. They all have all the other management practices. The previous crop before was the same. The soil type, all of the things are kept the same for everyone. So everyone's like managing the same farm, only making different decisions as close to as can be without actually being on exactly the same plot number. And the plots are randomized, and there's 3 of them, so they're spread out throughout so to try to keep that as fair as well. Careful records are kept all during the season, and one of the things you'll see if you want to go to the UNL TAPS website, there's reports, and you can see some of the information is displayed on what's been collected in the past. All right, this is an example of what happened in 2020. In fact, the data I'm going to talk about today is 2020. I wanted to talk about 2021, but we haven't got it all processed. We don't have all the yields in, and there's a few things that would keep it from being able to make some decisions and show you what happened. So you're not going to get a preview of the before the banquet, which is in January, which you're welcome to attend, and anybody's welcome to attend if they want to make reservations and get online and figure that out. We'd be glad to have you come and see what the results are and what's going on. All right, so this is where the plots are laid out. We have the sorghum contest here in 2020, and we also then have the plots for the different 2017s that we had involved in the sprinkler corn contest. All right, now the motivation behind TAPS. Why does it work? I want to briefly talk about that, not spend too much time on that. But basically speaking, motivation comes from being self-directed. We're not telling people what to do or how to do. They're basically competing. They're competing using their own ideas, their own thoughts. We will share information about past. We will talk about things that we think are important and during some of the discussions. And there will also be available vendors and different technologies. You can talk to that, plus the peer-to-peer interaction, and make your own decisions and do your own thing. But people can focus on whatever they want. So if they really want to try something different with fertilizer, or they want to understand a certain water sensor and how to use it, or any of those kinds of things, they get an opportunity to do that. Or if they want to make decisions different than perhaps they do on their farm to see how that affects the yield or outcomes, they can do that too. So in a sense, it's a university, kind of a university run experiment that you define the experiment based on what you want to do. And so there's some of that going on itself. The other reason that people want to do this is that people like finding solutions and like helping neighbors and friends. I mean, it's a human thing to do. And it's one of the common reasons that we're motivated as people, especially people that are striving to do the best they can. Education centered around the learner is what he chooses. As I mentioned, it's consistent and effective for adult learners. I mean, it's one thing to walk into a thing and, it's a class, and we're going to learn this, 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 and this, but that's not the way it's run. It's basically, okay, it's a contest. You're going to try to compete for some profitability or an efficiency and or yield and or all three, which is the hope. And so whatever you learn or whatever you do is going to be up to you. It's also got the social events and the social things. And this really, I think, is an opportunity for farmers to network and to get peer-to-peer engagement and to develop maybe some mentors and some people that they can mentor and help each other. And we've seen that happen in the TAPS program. That's a motivational thing. It's also a safe environment. So in other words, if I go out and do something and I have a complete failure as far as productivity, I find out real quick that, maybe that's not something I want to do on my farm. Or maybe I find something that works really, really well, and then maybe I'll start working into my farming. And this is an opportunity to do that without taking the financial risk of, okay, so I did it on 160 acres, and now 160 acres has got half the yield that I expected. And so guess what? I got a huge cost, and that's not cool at all. Also, to use technology, and is it really worth using? Is it a benefit to your operation? That's what we talk about when we talk about a safe environment. Now, here's the people during the 2020 season that were associated with us. And you can see there's a lot of different companies doing a lot of different things. And a lot of these companies are accessible and have technology in the contest. And here's just like in 2020, we had 15 different technology companies that were involved with the technology alone. We're not just talking, we had other things besides technology. We had plant sensing, we had imagery, we had soil and plant sampling, we've had scouting, we had plot photos, we had drone footages, we had soil water monitoring and weather and station data also available. These are just, an example of the areas of the technology that was used in the TAPS that was available to TAPS participants in dealing with and there were some people that actually managed their plots and never actually saw them physically. All right, so today was promised we're going to have lessons learned from TAPS. So what we're going to do is we're going to delve a little bit into the data, and we're going to talk about, what that means and how that difference resulted in the outcome that we had, which was most profitable or whatever. So let's move forward. Here's you can also follow and get this information. There's a report for the 2020 year. It's there available at the UNL taps.unl.edu website. You just simply go to the website, you click on reports, and you find the report you want, and you can click it, it'll open it, you can view it, you can print it or do whatever you want with it. It's a PDF, I believe. Okay, there are 3 contest awards. There's the most profitable, and this focuses on, okay, reality. In other words, in some contests, like you've heard of yield contests, that's great, but they don't talk anything about cost or benefit. In other words, there's no concept that, okay, this is how much can you grow? That's all it's about. How much can you grow? Well, that's good to know, but it doesn't really good to necessarily mean it's going to be the most beneficial thing for you to do. I mean, there's people that grow 500 bushel corn or have. I mean, okay, was that profitable? Especially they did it on 1 acre. I mean, who knows? I mean, the amount of fertilizer and all the micronutrients and all the other things that they had to do. I mean, was it profitable? I don't know. I have no idea, but it wasn't about that. It was all about yield. And so that contest really doesn't help people understand the relationship between cost and revenue. And that's really what you want to understand as a farm manager. It's that relationship is important. We're going to find out here a little bit that yield is important, but yield has got to come at the right cost and provide the right revenue. Otherwise, you don't make any money. And that's really, really important when it comes to farming, because to be in farming over the long haul, you do have to, you have to make a profit, even if it's not every year, but you have to do it, occasionally at least to keep yourself going. And so we have a $2,000 award for that. And then the production efficiency with the current environment and in regulation and the government and the resource allocation and all the talk about supplying the world food and all these things, resources are scarce, and being efficient is very, very important. And how you use fertilizer and how you use water specifically are the 2 things that we probably worry about in Nebraska the most, which has to do with water quantity as well as water quality. And there's these issues. So being efficient and with nitrogen and water is very, very important. And so the contest also has a component associated with production efficiency associated with water and nitrogen. The last thing is yield, and highest yield, there is an award. It's a $500 award, but it's not just that simple, because in this award, it's very simple. You can win the yield, but if you're like the least profitable, you could actually get zero money instead of the 500, because it's discounted by how much you're under the profit. So if you're 90% of the people were more profitable than you, you get 90% of the $500, or no, 10%. Not sorry, like I said it wrong. 10% of the $500, and that's like, okay, 10% is like $50. Well, that's different than 500, but you still get an award for the yield because you did good, but you didn't make profit. So it's kind of like a penalty for not being profitable just because you got yield. Kind of illustrates the point that yield isn't always profit. Sometimes it is, not always. Okay, so basically in the 2020 year, let's talk about that. Let's get into that. Let's delve into that. Let's talk about some of the things that happened. Let's talk about why some people did perhaps, or some teams were successful where other teams didn't have quite as much success. There were 15 different hybrids. Now, one of the things that we found out in TAPS, and there's an article written on this in what we call Tips from TAPS, and you can find that on the website. It talks about variety. It talks about variety selection and how important that is. We found that there was as much as $150 difference in selecting the right variety versus not selecting the right variety. You talk about huge impact, that's major. So the question is, what is the right variety? And one of the things that we're going to be doing here in the future with TAPS is we're going to try to discover how people go about that and what's the best. Maybe there's a systematic way that it can help all people select better varieties. So selecting the right variety is really, really important. And then that has a lot to do with yield and the resources you use to get to that yield is what's really important, not just the highest yield, but the yield for the right cost and for that sort of thing. Now, seeding rate ranged from 28,500 to 35,000 seed per acre, pretty, down the middle there. Nitrogen fertilizer range though from 120 to 240 pounds per acre. And what's interesting, just because some people we're going to find out put on a lot of fertilizer didn't necessarily get the yields. It has to do with the combination of yields and other things like the right variety and the right amount of water, because irrigation also becomes an important factor in this thing. And as you can see, irrigation varied between an application of 7.3 to 16.8 inches. Now, we also had a farm where we didn't put any water or fertilizer on, and this is actually the base that we get, help us decide on efficiency that we use in a calculation, but that's another topic for another day. All right, so this is basically a table of of what people did. So we got the seeding rates, which are in thousands. We got the variety, we got the farm number, and then we've got, okay, so it starts out with farm number, goes to hybrid, then goes to seeding rate, and then it talks about you have different dates where nitrogen fertilizer is applied, and it tells you how much, like there's a pre-plant, and then there's an amount after that, and then there's some fertigation opportunities. I think there's 4 fertigation opportunities. So they have a side dress and they have a pre-plant operation that you can put a certain amount of fertilizer on. Now, some people put in a lot of fertilizer in the beginning. Some people didn't, just side dressed it. The different people did different things. You can also then see that the irrigation, you can see how that varied. Like all the way over after the total for the nitrogen, you come over and you see, look, all the different types of irrigation. As we said, 7.3 or whatever it was to 16.8, which is 16.8 was farm 8, I believe. All right, so looking at that, you can see the different yields. Well, just because, for example, putting on little water, there's people that put on like less than 12 inches of water and got okay yield. I mean, like the 262 bushels, but they put on maybe, how much fertilizer did they put on it? So that same farm put on 166 pounds of N. So there's different combinations and different things, and we talk about that. And there's some profit listings over on the side, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But let's go to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about yield. It's funny, when I started out with TAPS, I thought that, oh, we're going to have all the same yields. Everybody's going to be about the same. They're going to be within 10 or 20 bushels of each other, because these are all good farmers, and they are good farmers, and they're good guys. Of course, they may be trying something new, so that could affect their yields. But you're thinking, and I'm thinking that variety shouldn't be that different. Well, this is the 5th year we've done this, and I want to tell you, variety is a huge thing. How you go about it is a huge thing as far as productivity. And I mean, it's the same year, it's the same temperature, it's the same rainfall, same field, same everything. The only differences are in the combination of how they applied the 6 decisions that we talked about. But anyway, long story short, we got as high as in the 2020 season, as high as 295 bushels and as low as 141. The 108 bushels, again, is that control field that I talked about. No nitrogen and no water. So that would be the planted pretty normal as for irrigated. That's one of the problems. It's not dryland planted, but it's a measure of productivity, or what it would be without fertilizer and without water, as a representative thing, so that we can judge efficiency based on fertilizer use and water use and variety as well. So farm 1 actually had the highest yield with 295 bushels per acre. Then we got farm 25 had the lowest yield for the group at 141 bushels. Now that's a lot of bushels. That's like 154 bushels of grain difference. That's huge. If you have 154 bushels to work with as far as selling, that's going to make a big difference, specifically depending on what you paid per acre for your cost, which we're going to talk about that. All right, this is the insurance decision. We can even see here that a lot of producers have different feelings. We had yield protection policies bought. We had, they're all mostly enterprise units. There is some other units or special units, or want to talk about individual fields being insured, but most of the time it was there's a lot of enterprise units, which makes sense given the contest. Anyway, so we had yield protection, which stands for YP, and we had risk protection with harvest exclusion, okay, or revenue protection, sorry, with harvest price exclusion, HPE. There's different, but they had different values of coverage, like there's 80%, there's different coverage values and different costs. And so 65%. And so everybody did it a little differently. Now this becomes in handy because there are times when there has been shortages and things that happen out in the field that we've had to discount and have insurance or hail damage declared or whatever, or prices can change. And if you're not covered, it can make a difference. Plus we require them to make an insurance decision in the contest. All right, now we've got the corn contest cost. Now, whereas productivity seemed to be a pretty wide range. I mean, 150 cost, it was a little bit narrower. I mean, you went from like 814 down to 645. I mean, that's quite a bit of money, I guess. But at the same time, the people in the middle, I mean, I mean, 661 to, almost 700. There's a lot of guys that were in that range that were within a $40 of each other. And so there's a lot of people that are pretty similar in cost. So this is cost per acre though. And cost per acre is important, but actually I would say I would care less about cost per acre. Well, it gives you an idea, a measure of how much you spent. It's not really give you a measure how much it costs you per bushel. And that cost per bushel is really what you want to do. So in other words, cost can be derived from many different ways. And this is one thing I've learned from the TAPS, is your combination of cost and how you do it really can make a big difference on what it costs you per bushel. In other words, productivity. And that's where yield comes in. See, if you got $645 and you only produce 100 bushels, that's going to be a high per bushel cost compared to somebody that's got $814 and push, so 141 bushels at that price, if that was the same person, which it's not. And the other person is $814 and they produce the most, which this is not the case. These numbers at the bottom show that. But like farm 1, which was the high producer, only had a cost of $747. Whereas if we look back at the farm with the lowest yield, which was farm number 25, and we look here at 25, what was their cost? We got here, they got a pretty high cost. It's up in the upper range here. And that's 722. Well, that, guess what? They didn't have the bushels to push that cost down on a per bushel basis. So their per bushel value is going to really be hurt. And this illustrates that point. Remember I said 25, which is lower producing? This is, this is revenue. Now farm 25 did a good job of marketing though. They got $4.27 that year. And that was the highest of anyone on a per bushel basis. Well, that's amazing when you really think about it. But the lowest value for this particular year was the $2.84. And that was more to do with the fact what they got per bushel, because what was subtracted from that is transportation. And they sold their corn in a distance away. And as a result of that, the transportation costs ate up some of that value. So their value that they received per bushel was less than that. It wasn't necessarily kind of as cost. So it kind of hurt them. All right, so there's some other things going on here, but basically speaking, we go from about $3.23 to $4.27. I mean, there's like $1 difference in what people receive. Now, these people all have the same markets, same opportunity to market, the same amount basically to market, well, similar. And I mean, obviously they produce, in the end, they produce more or less than each other, but they all had a fairly large quantity of corn to market. And yet we have huge average price differences. Some of these people were able to take advantage of some of the spikes during the year. Some people didn't, some people. And so marketing becomes a critical thing. Now, we're going to see that a little bit further on when we talk about profitability. So let's go to the next slide. Now, this is the total revenue. So now we're talking about that price that they received, and they're multiplying that times the number of bushels they received, which was that other chart. And so farm number one had the highest revenue. Now, what's fascinating is they were also the ones with the highest yield. Well, is a revenue a result of yield or is a result of price? Well, it's actually a result of the combination of two. We're going to see that in a minute. But basically speaking, farm one has the highest revenue, and with the 1,184, they almost have $1,200, whereas the next one is probably closer to 1,000 to 1,500 or $1,050, you know, 35, whatever. So it's not too much, but there's 100 and I mean, you know, it's $150 difference. And that's quite a bit of money when you're talking about on a per acre basis. So for every acre, they got $150 more. Well, $150 can go a long way to pay some bills. So there's a big difference between farm one and the following farms. Now, the other farms, obviously they made $1,000. They still did pretty good. But now you get down here to some of these guys like farm number 7. They only made a total revenue of $440. Well, you and I both know that's not going to cover costs, even if you got a low cost operator, which was an unfortunate event. And it has to do with the fact is, so farm 7, if we can find farm 7 on this chart, they actually ended, they got the lowest price. Well, that makes sense. Then they also had the lowest revenue, because when it comes to yield, where's yield? There's yield. Farm number 7 didn't have a great yield either. They were like third from the bottom, if you don't count the base farm. Okay, so that's one of the things that you have to watch out. So it's that combination of yield, and here's the profit. Here's what we got as far as profit is concerned. So profitability then is like $437 an acre for farm 1. Farm 9 now farm 8, which had the second revenue, I believe. Yeah, second highest revenue, did not have the second highest profit. Well, why is that? Because their costs were higher than was farm 9, 22, and 27. Even though they had more revenue, they had a higher cost. So this is where cost control now becomes important. It illustrates the point that, okay, if you can get the same production and do for less cost, that makes a big difference, because revenue is a function of your marketing. I mean, that has nothing to do with your cost structure. It has everything to do with how well you sold your corn. So the two things that you should focus on after looking at this is, okay, I need to focus on my revenue side, and I need to focus on my cost side, and I need to marry the two together so that I maximize my profitability, or the difference between the two. So that doesn't mean you spend the most money or that you have the lowest cost. What it means is that you have the right cost with the right inputs to get the best yield you can for the value. So in other words, you don't buy things that aren't going to return their cost. Everything that you bought or put money into, you got a return on. And that would be the right thing to do, because then you have maximum bushels. And then when you maximize your revenue by getting a good market value, that's when you make the most money, and that's where you hit that sweet spot where profit is maximized. And that's the whole point of the whole thing. And the TAPS has brought this out over and over and over again. It's not just one thing. It's not just cost control. It's not just marketing. It's both. You got to have both, and they got to work together towards to maximize that profit. Otherwise, you just don't ever seem to get quite where you'd like to be. Okay, now let me talk about this from an efficiency point of view a little bit. This just, I hope this isn't a confusing table, not table, graph. Let's go with graph. The blue things are basically, so if I took every farm and I took their yield and I said yield is according to what you spent. So in other words, if I have the highest yield, I should have the highest cost. Okay, so farm one had the highest yield. And so it says they're the 27th in cost. That's what it's forecasted to be. So in other words, I predict cost based on yields. So in other words, I say the lowest yield should have the lowest cost and the highest yield should have the highest cost. Well, generally you could say that probably holds. Well, what this graph shows, it shows that relationship in reality. So the gray line is, this is what they were ranked as far as cost was concerned. So if we look at farm 6, which had the lowest inputs and the lowest cost, it also had the lowest yield. Well, that makes sense, absolutely. But if we go to farm 1, which had the highest yield, we kind of expected them to have the highest cost. And this is a cost per acre, not per bushel, but per acre. So in other words, we would expect them to have spent the most because they got the most yield. That's not the case. In this case, they were 23rd. So they were actually 4 rankings below what we expected them to be, given this relationship would hold. So that's really good. And so farm number 27, same thing. Now farm 8 is a little different. They were ranked 25th, but they actually 26th. So they had a little bit higher cost than what they probably were ranked at as far as the yield is concerned. And so you go through this and look at it, and basically what it tells you is that this farmer with lower cost, in other words, if the blue line is higher than the gray line, these farmers they did better than we expected them to do if we were just trying to forecast their cost based on their production. So in other words, and what that means is that they did better than their cost suggested that they might, if you ranked them all and everybody was equal. In other words, if you had one farmer and he was doing different things, and you expect that all the yields would be related to whatever, in other words, each input that was added or more of it or less of it or the timing or whatever, they would actually incur more yield because of a higher cost. But that's not the case. Some of these guys, like, let's take farm 16, this guy's in trouble because basically he's got the highest cost. That's number 27, that's the gray line. In actuality, he spent the most money because he was ranked 27th, but he only had the 13th. He was ranked 13th in as far as the yield. In other words, the yield he got would have only justified him being 13th, and that's not cool at all. Because in other words, according to the trend line here, he would be expected to spend less money than he did to get the same yield that he got, based on what we're using that as an efficiency measure, as a way to just kind of gauge. So like farms number 25, 7, 18, 3, 24, 13, and 16 really didn't perform well at all. They basically had a much higher cost than their yields. Now, is this seed variety? Is this fertilizer? Is this, you'd have to tear apart each farm individually and look at those individual things. And I wish we had the time to do that today, but we unfortunately don't. But it's something you can look at the TAPS report and get an idea of, and look through and figure out kind of where they fell down on that particular item. All right, so let's look at the not a graphic, but a table. And this basically is the top farms ranked in order of profitability. And this shows you that farm 1 was the best, farm 9 was second best, 22 was third, 27th was fourth, and 8th was last or 5th. Okay, and it shows you what rank they had as far as yield. So basically, farm 9, which had the 5th highest yield, it didn't have the 2nd highest yield. And what is that? So it's telling me that, look, you didn't have to have the 2nd highest yield to do the best. So why? Their cost was 5th as well. Now that means that 5th best. Well, so they had a little bit cost there, but their revenue outperformed. So in other words, their marketing outperformed the other 3 below it and made them win over them as far as this ranking is concerned, as far as the amount of money they had. So in other words, they if they had controlled their costs better and had a higher yield, they could have competed probably closer to the #1 ranking, is what it's saying. And that's what's interesting, is you can look at each one of these and you can start beginning to understand where they were weak and where they were strong. And that's not to point a finger at anybody. That's simply an opportunity to see where, oh, if you this is important, that's important to this particular situation, to this particular decision process. And all those numbers are available to look at and to go through and see. Now, let's tear it apart even a little bit further here. So we got profit per acre. Now, if you look at this, the bottom four, 9, 22, 27, and 8, all have close to 250, 200, about 240 to $276. Okay, so they're within like $30 of each other. That's not a lot of distance. Well, look at number 1. Farm 1 basically outperformed them by, wow, tons. It's what, 200, almost 200, no, it's $175, or, somewhere in that neighborhood. So the point is 100, why did Farm 1 do so good? Well, we know that they had a high yield, but look at their profit per bushel. So basically it's a difference between their cost. They had one of their lower, see their cost, even though their cost per acre was pretty high. In fact, I think if you look at on a basis, it's higher than some of these others. Their cost per bushel is lower. Well, why is that so? Well, because they have the right amount of $2.53 a bushel. It costs that because their yield is low relative to their cost. So in other words, even though they spent some money, they got really good yields out of it. And the good yields out of that money spent is what caused that to be low. So in other words, you can spend a lot of money like that Farm 25 we saw, and you could end up with poor yields. Your cost per bushel is going to kill you. But in this case, they got the really good yields. So apparently luck or skill or whatever it was, they put their money in the right places and got the yield out of it. So in water and in fertilizer and whatever they did, seed variety, they got the right one where they got the opportunity to make a profit of $1.48 per bushel. And then they had a lot of bushels. And so because they have a lot of bushels, and that they're like 43 cents above the next farm as far as on a per bushel basis. So for every bushel that they produced, they had 43 cents more profit. And then they produced an additional, from the second counted, they produced an additional 33 bushels. Well, 33 bushels is, that's a lot of bushels. So they're making $1.48 more to start with, and then 43 cents more for every bushel for the other farm. So they made, wow, a lot of money, and their cost was not that high. So you're looking at the cost here. The cost was $747. Well, there's one that's $795. Look at Farm 8 and Farm 27 and Farm 22. Their cost is the same, but yet look at the productivity. Now there is farm number 27, but it's almost $15 more a bushel for that particular farm. Anyway, point being is it's a relationship of cost, productivity, and revenue. And revenue can be altered by marketing, and you can really help yourself, and you can get more per bushel, but the number of bushels you have to sell is related to yield, and the yield then is related to your cost. But your cost can't be like, oh, just throw everything at it, get the kitchen sink, because then your cost is too high. And so the cost overcomes the revenue that you make in marketing. So you've got to really have the combination. Again, I'm saying you got to have marketing, you got to have productivity, and you got to have cost control. You got to do all three. It's not just one. It's not just cost minimization or, revenue maximization. I get the most revenue. In other words, you can't just do marketing. You can't just do cost control. You've got to have both in combination to really get that profit up there. And it's that combination that really makes the difference in profitability. Okay, this kind of gives you a view of the whole thing. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we're just about out of time. I think we got like about 5 minutes left. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, Farm 1, look what they did across the board. As far as green is ranked as the first. They were first in revenue. They were first in profit. They were not first in cost, especially, in fact, cost is an inverse relationship. The one with the best, lowest cost was farm 6, but again, that was a university farm and a control. So the second best one would be your blue one, which would be your farm, was it farm 2? Oh, no, that's cost per acre rank. No, it's farm 22, sorry. Our 21. All right, they had $6.45. That was the second best from cost point of view. Now, if you take the cost per acre rankings per acre and then compare them to cost per bushel, you have a complete different story. Farm 1 is ranked first. And then you got some of the others like 8 and 9 are in there. And then you also have farm 22 does have the low cost, but it's not farm 21, sorry. But farm 22, I mean, it's $2.70. I mean, they're third. So they did pretty good. And then you got 261. But the point is, again, it really iterates the same point I've been trying to make. You got to get, the revenue has to do with the number of bushels and also the price you get. So the better your market price, the better your revenue is going to be, regardless of whatever your production is. But your production then is based on your cost somewhat. And sometimes if you spend too much to get that production, then you're going to lose money. If you spend the right amount, you know what to do and put the right inputs, you're going to end up with the most possible profit. And so that's the sweet spot. That's where you want to be, and that's where you want to go. All right. Now, I've got some quotes here that I want to share with you. There's somebody, that Chris Anderson, he's a technical agronomist for Fontenelle. He said, it's a great program. A lot of hard work allows ability to get familiar with comfortable technologies, including proven economic ones, and many different, and maybe different than what people are comfortable with when they use technology. And this opportunity, basically he's saying, in TAPS gives you an opportunity to work with it so you can get comfortable with it or decide it's something that you want to purchase or not purchase or use on your farm or not. It is a safe place, and that's what he's referring to learn. All right, and they're hoping this program will continue and do things. This is Curtis Shield. He's basically works for USDA. He obviously is excited about TAPS. He says it's awesome. It's a hands-on experience. It's great dimension for visiting with producers. But I think it's also a great dimension for producers visiting with producers. Anyway, he's a supporter. We've had people that come back and done TAPS year after year because they just seem to learn something new every year and try something new, and it's really amazing. And so he's saying that. Then we got Crystal Rhodes. Now, Crystal is our program manager, and if you ever talk to somebody named Crystal Rhodes, you'll know what I mean. She's an awesome program director. She's an awesome coordinator, and she's just a great person just to know. And she's right. This program has become a model, and it is unique in the sense that we're not teaching or preaching to people, but people are learning what they want to learn. They're investigating what they want to learn. What's surprising, and I'll say this, in one of the things that I did in a couple surveys in the first years, is that people learn things they didn't think that they were going to learn. They learned about things. For example, the first year in our marketing part of it, not a lot of people did anything marketing. They just kind of waited till the end of the year like they would in their old farm. But they found out quickly that the winter didn't do that. And so the next year, when people started looking at the marketing, they began to realize that there were some forward contracting opportunities during the season. Doesn't happen every season, like perhaps the season before this 2020. Marketing at the end where the highest price seemed to be towards the end of the year, or 2021, whatever. The point being is different years are different, but if you don't take the opportunity, you may not be able to make as much profit as you could by marketing that way. And the people have learned that, and some of those things have happened in the TAPS. And it's amazing. I've talked to people that said, I didn't realize that forward contracting could make that much difference in your profit. There's a bunch of things that people have said about that. There's other things too. This guy runs it at a junior college. It inspires critical thinking, and it does, because when you're running a contest, and the thing is that you got to think about how it all works together. Plus, maybe you have an idea what you think is going to work, and then you use your idea and you try it, and at the end of the year you get the results, and you say, wow, look at this guy, he did something completely different than I did, and he got a different result. Maybe I should be thinking differently than I'm thinking, or maybe what I'm thinking, man, I'm glad I'm thinking what I'm thinking is the best things in sliced bread. And so that might be an opportunity there too. So that's happened a lot in TAPS. So the discovery of information. And the fact is, no one's telling you to do it. You're doing it because you want to do it. You're doing it because you want to learn. It makes a huge difference in what you learn. Whereas typically in extension, what will happen is we get up and talk. We try to preach the gospel according to what we know about research. And it doesn't always come across as being, number one, does it really fit on your operation? Number two, it's not you that's really making that decision. And number three, it's risky. This opportunity with TAPS gives you an opportunity to test all those things out, look at things and do it. Because the university also runs a farm, and we do fairly well. I mean, we've actually almost won a couple times. But basically because we're able to do things that we use our theoretical, and it shows, okay, we tell you to use less water, we use this much water. Did it work? Well, yeah, it really did. So there's some credibility there the university gains. Now, we don't always do it perfect either, and we're learning just like you are. And so maybe it's helping us do better research and do some other things. And there's a lot of things we learn from farmers and see that are absolutely amazing. So the TAPS program has been really good for the university from that perspective. Okay, there's some other things that were said here, and I think I'm going to skip them. They're just information about people. But here's your contact information. Here's the TAP leaders. We have Darren Rudnick, we have myself, we have Chuck Burr, we have Crystal Rhodes. Turner Dorr, he's the guy that basically goes out and does a lot of the work, make sure it gets done because he works for Darren. Tessa Burford, who we do not have a picture of, she works for me. She works a lot on the newsletters and all that kind of stuff. But you can contact any one of these people and talk to us about the TAPS program. We want people to participate. We would invite you to come to our banquet. We invite you to look at our reports. We'd like you to come in, and if you want to come in and talk to me about the numbers, I would be glad to go over and talk to you about individual farms and how they've done and what's going on with them. There are reasons, but the thing is, from today's discussion, I want you to take home is the fact is it's a balanced operation. You need cost control, you need marketing, and you need to have the right varieties in the right place, and you need to be doing the fertilizing right, keep your costs down, because basically all the other costs in this, those costs that I showed you and the cost differences only come from those 6 decisions, which isn't everything that you spend money on. So there's other things that you could spend money on that perhaps you need to think about as well. And that is, what's your equipment cost and what's that costing you per acre? And there's a whole lot of other things you need to consider when you're talking about profitability, but we could talk about those. Anyway, that's my presentation today. I would take any questions or answer anything I can. Ryan, are there any questions?
Nothing so far, Matt.
Well, okay. I have enjoyed being here. The TAPS program, in my opinion, of course, I'm one of the creators, is going to be pretty high. It's not perfect. It's not for everybody, but if you're interested in learning to know more about your abilities and benchmark your abilities as a farmer and compete with other people, this is an opportunity to benchmark those. Plus, it's an opportunity to try new things. It's an opportunity to compare different ways of doing things. It's an opportunity to try and learn about technology and how to use it and what works for you. And in fact, it's opened my mind to a lot of things that I didn't know just simply by participating, and understand things that I didn't realize were important. But as I've gone through the process of watching the data and the information, I've learned a tremendous amount. Thank you very much.